whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere aki nei. Move over, super over. The Black Caps put the past behind them, smashing the T20 in the last 20 minutes, that is, beating England to secure their World Cup final spot. The aunties at the pointy end of raising COVID immunisation rates in Kawerau. Speaking of jabs, Whānau Ora and the DG of Health go another round in court over the release of Maori vaccination data. The growing call for returnees to move out of MIQ so COVID positive cases can move in. The cocaine ring dealt a massive blow by a police op spanning 3 countries including New Zealand. A no ball for Sport New Zealand when it comes to COVID club cricket rules. Our two Nicks test the wicket.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. A public health researcher wants MIQ dropped altogether for some travellers so fewer people with COVID risk falling through the cracks at home. Some COVID positive patients are waiting up to 3 days to even hear from authorities, let alone have a health check. Otago University researcher Dr. Lucy Talfa Barnard says vaccinated returnees from low-risk countries pose such little risk of bringing the virus back. She says if they're remaining in Auckland, they should be able to skip MIQ altogether to free up beds for those who have it.
It's so much better for them if they can be somewhere where there are people checking on them regularly rather than at home where they're kind of reliant on a whole bunch of services being able to coordinate well to make sure that they're well supported.
MIQ stays half from Sunday. A person who died in Tamaki Makaurau with COVID-19 is included in today's 185 cases nationally. The death is subject to a police investigation. A Southern DHB member has resigned after using her position to protest against Countdown's proposed vaccine mandate. RNZ revealed this morning Ilka Bequis was one of many people who bombarded an email inbox intended for feedback from the supermarket chain staff. Jake McKee reports.
Ilka Bequis emailed Countdown on Monday, saying that as a DHB member, she found the proposed mandate amoral, unethical and medically unnecessary. She first told RNZ it was in a personal capacity, but later said she used her board position because it carried weight. The board chair, Peter Hodgson, says her resignation is the right decision, but thanked her for her 2 years of work. He says it's important DHBs are able to show leadership and teamwork to protect communities against COVID-19. Countdown is still consulting its staff.
The lawyer for a mentally ill man jailed under the 3 strikes rule says the government needs to make its repeal retrospective. The government has pushed ahead with its promise to axe the law, arguing it leads to perverse and absurd outcomes. But lawyer Kevin Preston says the government must go further. He says offenders who've been hit by law should be either resentenced or made eligible for parole.
18 people have been made subject to a 3rd strike, so it wouldn't be too much of an effort for the courts to resentence those individuals.
Kevin Preston represents Daniel Fitzgerald. The Supreme Court this year overturned his 7-year prison term, ruling it excessive. The police say an organised crime group they describe as one of the country's biggest suppliers of cocaine has been dealt a massive blow. A 10-month joint operation by law enforcement in New Zealand, Colombia and the US has resulted in the seizure of 50 kilograms of cocaine, $300,000 cash and 9 arrests so far. The police's organised crime group director, Greg Williams, has this warning for others bringing the drug in.
So the message today is don't bother coming. We'll identify your people, we'll identify and break and disrupt your networks. We will go after your assets, whether here or offshore, and where necessary, we're quite prepared to extradite people back here who are involved in this offending.
Greg Williams expects there will be more arrests both in New Zealand and Colombia. The Midwives Union has filed with the Employment Relations Authority over what it says is a breach of commitment by district health boards. Miraz says it filed a compliance order with the ERA after DHB said they could not pay a $6,000 pay equity lump sum. In a statement, union co-leader Jill Ovens said the payment had been agreed to more than 2 months ago. The union says its members are ropeable over the situation. It's 4 minutes past 5. Former England captain Michael Atherton says New Zealand have shown they're the strongest team in the world across all formats of the game after reaching the final of the T20 World Cup. Daryl Mitchell's unbeaten 72 and Jimmy Neesham's blistering 27 off 11 balls in Abu Dhabi this morning led New Zealand to a dramatic 5-wicket semi-final win over England. The Black Caps reached the final of the 50 overs World Cup in 2019 and beat India earlier this year in the inaugural World Test Championship title. Meanwhile, Daryl Mitchell is crediting his time spent playing domestic cricket for his success in the international arena. His innings is his highest score in T20 internationals, and he considers himself lucky to have made his international debut as a 27-year-old.
I learned my game a little bit and go through the highs and lows in domestic cricket so that, once you get onto the international stage, you understand what works for you both as a cricketer and as a person, and you can just go about doing your business.
The Black Caps now await the winner of tomorrow morning's semi-final between Pakistan and Australia, and the final is in Dubai on Monday morning. Parramatta back rower Marata Niukore has signed a 4-year contract with the Warriors but won't join them until 2023. Niukore has played 77 NRL games for the Eels since making his debut in 2018. That's the news.
Waihopai spy domes are retiring.
They've become a feature of that landscape down there. You've got a brand of wine, Spy Valley Wine, named after, who knows.
Black Caps raise the memory of Lords.
Daryl Mitchell does it for New Zealand.
Lucky enough to sort of hit a few sixes and get the job done.
Playground politics returns to Auckland.
We are so excited, and then we went celebrating and came back here. It was so fun.
Excited to be invited into your home. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 on RNZ National.
And now looking at the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. A front moves over the South Island tomorrow, bringing a period of heavy rain and strong northwesterly winds to parts of southern and central New Zealand. A reminder to please keep up to date with severe weather warning and watches. Now for Northland to Wellington, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country, fine spells and isolated showers, rain developing tomorrow afternoon. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine spells, isolated showers inland this evening with thunderstorms possible. Nelson, Bulla and Westland rain becoming persistent and heavy tomorrow morning before easing from the afternoon. For Marlborough and Canterbury, fine spells developing and isolated showers inland, patchy rain developing tomorrow afternoon and evening. Fiordland, Southland and Otago, showers, but a period of rain around midday tomorrow. Some showers will be heavy tomorrow afternoon. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few showers tomorrow. It's 7 minutes past 5.
Nā mihi marama, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The Black Caps have done it again, the swinging bats of Daryl Mitchell and Jimmy Neesham securing another World Cup cricket final. This time it's the T20 World Cup after a dramatic semi-final victory over title favourites England in Abu Dhabi this morning. New Zealand have now made the final at 4 of the last 5 major men's tournaments and are 1 match away from adding the T20 trophy to their Test Championship mace. Felicity Reid reports on a thrilling win engineered by an unlikely hero.
Full toss won't be a no ball. Will it go for 4? It does. Daryl Mitchell does it for New Zealand. The pain from Lords in 2019 and the sheer delight from players and fans in Abu Dhabi. Outstanding.
Call it redemption, call it revenge. Whatever label you put on it, this was undoubtedly a sweet moment for the Black Caps and the ever-growing swag of supporters. And if you think watching this morning's seesawing semi-final was stressful enough, imagine being at the centre of it, just as match-winning opening batter Daryl Mitchell was.
It's a bit of a blur, but I can imagine it was a hell of a game to watch, and I think the way England played was very special as well. So, it's obviously pretty cool to get the job done, but I know it was a game of inches, that's for sure.
Mitchell played the leading role, finishing with 73 off 48, as the Black Caps reached their target of 167 with 6 balls up their sleeve. But for the majority of the chase, it was England in control and looking set to secure their spot in the final. New Zealand needed 60 off just 29 balls when Jimmy Neesham strode to the crease. But Mitchell says the pair never panicked.
Probably sounds weird, but it never felt like it was out of our grasp. We knew that there were going to be matchups there that might suit us towards the end, and as long as we kept it sort of just within the certain numbers that we felt comfortable with, that we were always a chance. And yeah, I thought the way Nish came out and really dominated that one over really set the momentum.
That one over was the 17th. Neesham taking England seamer Chris Jordan for 23 runs. The Black Caps all-rounder didn't see out the chase, but hit 27 of just 11 balls. And England captain Owen Morgan says it's impossible to understate the importance of Neesham's contribution.
Everything worked right up until the point that Neesham came in. It's a fantastic cameo in I suppose, high-pressure circumstances when his team need it. We've played against Jimmy a lot. He's not struck the ball like that against us ever, so it's really good batting. Really good batting against a really good team. Morgan says his team, ranked number 1 in T20s, threw everything they had at the New Zealanders. The competitive nature in which we play against the Black Caps is always healthy. There's a huge amount of respect between both sides because we know every time we play them, we're going to be up against it. They don't give you a lot of leeway, they're very disciplined, and if you do win against them, you know you've played really well. The England captain was also full of praise for man of the match Mitchell, and rightly so. The late-blooming 30-year-old's innings follows a similarly impressive knock against the other pre-tournament title favourites, India, all having no prior experience opening the batting in T20s. But Captain Kane Williamson says he never brought into the talk of Mitchell's move up the order as an experiment. Not an experiment in terms of his character, and that's definitely something that stood out today and pretty much every game that he's come and played for us. And yeah, like an incredible knock. Yep, he hasn't done it a lot at the top of the order, but there's a real quality there, and he's come in and batted beautifully in a high-pressured situation. One more of those situations now stands between the Black Caps and back-to-back world titles. And with the job not done, Mitchell says they'll be keeping a close eye on tomorrow morning's second semi between Pakistan and Australia. Well,
I know we'll be watching it and we'll sort of start planning for both teams, but yeah, it'll be cool whoever we play against. You know, it's a World Cup final, it's going to be awesome, and I know we're going to walk out with a smile on our face and enjoy as much as we can. The Black Caps have 3 days to prepare for that last hurdle, with the T20 World Cup final set down for early Monday morning in Dubai.
And cricket fans in Auckland didn't regret the 3 a.m. wake-up.
I'm backing them for the World Cup. Fingers crossed. That was a really good game. England didn't lose a single game for the whole tournament. And then, yeah, Black has pulled that out from nowhere. That was good.
I think they're going to win the T20 World Cup. The reason I'm saying is the way they came up to the semis, like they didn't come up easily. They just came very hard. They fought very hard to came to semis and they won it. They're going to win the World Cup T20. 100%. Watch it on probably in 2 days' time. Yeah, 2 days, 3 days' time. 15th, I think.
You'll watch it?
Yeah, I will. Of course, I'll watch it. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Yes, I was. Because I always wanted to take revenge from England about the 2019 World Cup defeat. And I really think right now as well, they did not win. It was just the stupid rules that got... I'm just really happy about that, yeah.
We'll find out whether the Black Caps face Australia or Pakistan tomorrow, with the final taking place at 3 a.m. on Monday. Start conditioning yourself for the wake-up now. It is 13 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Kia ora rawatu mo te whakarongo mai. Thanks for tuning in. Our haere akine, the throwdown over Māori vaccination data heads back to court. Aunty power is about to be deployed in Kawerau as the town looks to drive up vaccination rates. Only 53% of the Bay of Plenty town is fully vaccinated. And after what's been described as a frustratingly slow start, community leaders are going into overdrive. Our reporter Jamie Tahana and cameraman Angus Drever are in Kawerau.
A crown of mist hung around the summit of Putuaki as it stood its guard over the mill town of Kawerau, already sweltering in the spring sun. The town of 7,000 sits off any main highway in a hollow where the Rangataiki plains meet the jagged Rotoma hills and the Kaingaroa forest's vast sea of Pinus radiata. With one of the country's highest Māori populations and some of the lowest incomes, Kawerau also has what Deputy Mayor Faylene Nui says are disappointingly low vaccination rates.
It's a deficit start. I'm not going to reframe that.
68% of people in Kawerau have had a first shot, while only 53% are fully vaxxed. But to understand why is to peel back complex layers of accessibility, resource, trust, misinformation and neglect. Debbie Griffin has been in Kawerau for decades. She's double vaxxed, many of her whānau are too.
Has it always been available here, or did you initially have to go to Rotorua?
I think it was whakatane. A lot of people I knew had to go over there. And then my mum and them, through one of our trusts out at Rotorua, they came and picked them all up and took them over there to get vaccinated. So there was probably about 3 van loads.
Whānau Ora says when the rollout did reach here, it was only 2 days a week, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Many in our community work in a 24/7 shift roster, 5 days a week, 9 to 3, but never going to work either. When you've got families leaving at 5, 6 in the morning and getting home at 6, 7 at night.
Then there's misinformation and mistrust. Trent Murray is vaccinated, but some in his whānau aren't. That's led to difficult conversations.
He's been reading stuff on social media and that, and it's kind of put him off a bit.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, he's sort of joined the skeptic mob, I suppose. Yeah, he's I don't know.
Debbie Griffin has been here from when the town was on a timber-stoked high to when that came crashing down with bouts of redundancies from the 1990s to today. She says there's a natural mistrust here, which can feed into that.
But around here, I think there's more of that anti-government than the anti-vax thing. It's more of a don't tell us what to do. Again, referencing to what Trent said, the colonialism and all that, and yeah.
That perception is something Jacqueline Johnson and Mel Downey deal with daily. They're with Waiariki Whānau Mentoring, building relationships with some of the town's hardest to reach families, including gangs. They say COVID is hardly the most pressing issue in day-to-day lives for many here. But they've held sessions with the DHB, a safe space to ask any question.
For me, it's for their well-being, and because of where their mindset with how we grew up, you know, because it's gone from COVID, but now it's gone to COVID Delta. That's actually a killer. So it's a virus that that can kill our whānau. So it's just more or less getting that education, really.
And they say they've been successful, but they've had to fight for it.
It's only hard if we're not supported, but we've had to actually be bold and go out there and say, hey, if you want this done, you need to meet us at this point.
Being bold is just being straight up, because this town is like that. You can't talk to them in that way where it's plastic.
There's a frustration here. All these tasks are obvious to everyone in Kawerau, and all this could have started months ago. Now that they're getting what they need, rates are picking up. Hundreds have come through events on the last 3 Saturdays. But Deputy Mayor Whānau Ora says they've been put on the back foot. They're hearing calls for towns like Kawerau to hurry up, but they've only really been able to start in recent weeks, she says. And now they're sprinting and about to deploy a key weapon. Mr. Nui says some of the town's aunties are prepared to go door to door themselves.
No greater push than a grumpy aunt.
Yep, they're the ones, and you just do as you're told. That's the auntie. Yes, auntie. Yes, Nan. That's pretty much how it works.
And there's now an added urgency. The Auckland border will come down this summer, whether Kawerau is ready or not.
And that piece from Jamie will be on our webpage. See you in court again. Whānau Ora wants the High Court to decide who wins in its battle with the Ministry of Health over Māori vaccination data. It's filed fresh legal papers after the Director-General of Health again refused to release the information. The Whānau Ora Commissioning Agency wants contact details for Māori who aren't fully vaccinated against COVID, so it can talk directly to them about getting immunised. The court previously ordered the Ministry of Health to rethink its earlier refusal. Ko taku manuhiri e nai nei ko Meripeka Raukawa Tate, who is the chair of the Whānau Ora Commissioning Agency. Tēnā koe, Meripeka.
Tēnā koe, Lisa.
So, vaccination rates for Māori have gone backwards, you say in your release today. How so?
Yes, it doesn't matter that we're putting a terrific amount of effort in. but we need to be plugged in more in terms of getting the data so that we can make better decisions and be more effective in providing the services. So from what we're seeing and getting the information that's coming in from our providers all around the country is that actually we're not getting to some of the family that do need some assistance right now. And there are various reasons for that.
So there's been a persistent gap, which was identified in court documents, of about 20%. Are you saying that gap's getting bigger between Māori and non-Māori?
From what we can see, yes, it is. And we suspect it's obviously going to get even bigger if we don't get in and vaccinate the families that we know or the whānau that we know, are out there. And that's all we're asking for is good data so that we can target and plug in the services and help make better decisions as well.
So the letter that the Director General of Health wrote to Whānau Ora says that he's spoken to Māori leaders, Māori health experts and Māori organisations, and basically he's saying to you that there are people in these groups who simply do not want you to have this information. Who are those people?
Yes, well, that's a very good question because we're talking to iwi leaders, we're talking to other providers up and down the country every day. If it's not about a health issue, it could be about housing. And there's not one iwi leader has said, if you get any information, we don't want you to look at ours, we don't want you to get it to our own providers, who I might add are linked in with their own iwi as well. So this surprises us. And I'm sorry to see that come out from Dr. Blomfield because what we want to do, Lisa, we want to do exactly what he has asked all New Zealanders to do, is to get vaccinated. So if we can help speed up the vaccination numbers for Māori, then that's what we want to do. And so I'm disappointed to see that. And you don't go up to Whānau without being asked. And so we went there recently. And as we know, we've just had some other letters of support coming in. We've had the Minister of Māori Development, Te Puni Kōkiri, Minister Jackson, coming out and saying, listen, get that data and get the whānau vaccinated. So I'm not quite sure where Dr. Blomfield's coming from.
Do you think that some of these organisations are too scared to speak out publicly and oppose you publicly?
Well, I don't know why they would why they would oppose, because we're always handling data. Whānau Ora, that's the job. I mean, you handle data, you're making good decisions based on what you need to do in terms of housing or anything really, in terms of some of those significant social issues. So we're always handling data. We don't throw it all around for everybody to see. I mean, we've been in this for many, many years now. And so perhaps he's just saying we cannot be trusted. And if he's saying that, then maybe he needs to tell us that and why he believes so.
Okay, well, the DHB's expressed concern that there would appear to be real risks of the vilification and bullying of unvaccinated individuals. Do you think they think you're the bullies?
Well, that would hardly be the case. We certainly don't bully out there, but we know that there are people, some of our whānau members out there that don't want to be vaccinated. We understand that. But the longer it goes on, the more difficult it gets to reach these families. And there are a lot of people that don't want to be vaccinated. All we're saying is, do you have sufficient information to make an informed decision? Is there anything else that we can do for you? Are there other providers that need to come along beside you? That's the sort of thing that we're wanting. It certainly has nothing to do with bullying. It's just to make sure that our whānau are not being parked up on the sideline and said, well, we're going to worry about everybody else, but not you. Our whānau need to be given the same opportunities as everybody else to keep themselves and their families safe.
Is this about John Tamahere? Do some people not trust him?
It could always be about John. I mean, there are some people that have, for various reasons over the years, maybe they don't like John, but I can tell you this, John has a very low tolerance for inaction and for incompetence. And what we have seen, how the rollout happened all those months ago, we were not a priority. In February, we said we can help and we can be far more effective. No, thank you, said the Ministry of Health and the DHBs. We've got this covered. And of course we haven't. We've seen the slow uptake. We've seen Māori, we've seen social media move into a space where we could have been encouraging and talking to our whānau about the benefits of vaccination. And that hasn't happened.
But Mary Peka, do you actually think that he could be the barrier here, whether it's perceived or not, that there are some people who simply do not trust him or have concerns about the way he operates?
I don't believe that is the case. I think it's more, John's been around for such a long time. Everybody knows that John is absolutely staunch about making sure Māori get no less than anybody else. So I don't believe it's that, but I certainly do believe that there are some people in Wellington that do like to retain the power and control over of the services that go to Māori. And they also, Lisa, want to pick and choose who's going to deliver those services. We have our own aspirations, by Māori, for Māori, and why shouldn't we? We're far more effective than any DHB in terms of what we provide, the Māori health providers.
So the iwi Chairs Forum wrote to the Ministry of Health, and in part of that letter it says it's for individual iwi to confirm their position in relation to any specific data release. What's wrong with doing it that way, going iwi by iwi?
Well, if you go iwi by iwi, we just do not have the time. We don't have it. We're hard up against this here right now. And you were just seeing that in Northland and the cases that have been announced today. We don't have the time. And also this is really getting quite stressful. We don't want to have an argument. We very much respect the work that Dr. Blomfield has done over many, many months in carrying the weight of concern for all New Zealanders. We want to support him to do that work, and if we can work more effectively, then our expectation from him is that he will help and support us, not put up ridiculous barriers like that.
We are expecting the government to announce something about Auckland's borders next week. On the 29th of November, Cabinet has its review and we'll hear about opening up. What happens if all the restrictions are loosened up sometime after the 29th of November, you don't have this data, and Māori are 20% behind in vaccination rates?
When the borders come down, Lisa, and people start to move, and particularly Aucklanders start to move, then you will see the cases go up. We are very, very concerned. I cannot tell you how gravely we are viewing this situation. And we're coming up to summer, Christmas time. People want to be with families. We fully appreciate that. So we are really hard up against a tight time frame. We must get in as soon as possible.
Is this a life and death situation?
We believe so. We absolutely believe so. And the situation for Māori families in January, February could look very dire indeed. And we don't want that to happen.
Mary Peka, before you go, because I know people are going to be concerned about this data is so you can only approach people about COVID vaccinations. What happens to that information after you've had the conversation? And they might tell you to go away, or they might say, yeah, cool, okay, fine. Either way, what happens to their contact details and information after you've had that contact?
Well, what happens normally now when you collect a lot of information, that information has been destroyed. It's like the census, all of that sort of information after a period of time. And we could even work with the Ministry of Health on that. We could work beside them and say, listen, are there any checks and balances that you would like to ensure that we put in place? And we can do all of that. But we don't want to make this difficult. We don't want to get up Dr. Blomfield's nose. We want to do what's right by the whānau that need our help. And we need to do it as soon as possible.
Ngā mihi mo te rā. Thanks for joining us. That is Mary Peka Raukawa-Tate, who is the chair of the Whānau Ora Commissioning Agency, going to the High Court again to dispute that decision from the Ministry of Health refusing to release Māori vaccination information. It is 27 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback. Nō reira anei na kaupapa mo te hōtaka nei. What do you think about that? Privacy versus the, public good. Health crisis, a pandemic. Should people's personal information be released so that agencies can follow up and check in about vaccination and whether they can encourage them to be vaccinated? Pātui mai, text me 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. There are calls to drop MIQ for some travellers so space can be given to COVID cases who risk falling through the cracks at home. It's as a South Auckland GP says anxious COVID positive patients are waiting up to 3 days to even hear from authorities, let alone have a health check. For every one person with COVID in MIQ, 9 are isolating at home. The Ministry of Health says they were taken somewhat by surprise by the number of COVID cases in recent weeks, even though they're in line with estimates. Jordan Bond reports.
Dr Matiri Harwood, a GP at Papakura Marae Health Clinic, is checking up on 20 COVID-positive people who are isolating at home. She says government health authorities are slow to get in contact with them.
Their guidelines say that they will be the first point of contact. They'll make sure that these things are in place, that patients have the oximeters, are being reviewed clinically as well as having those welfare issues addressed, but that hasn't been our experience. People are waiting 2 to 3 days to hear from anybody.
She visited 7 recently positive households on Friday, and none of them had heard from the Ministry of Health or the DHB.
So I had to go out and do those oxygen checks for them because they're really worried about am I unwell? They don't know their oxygen levels without having their oximeter meter, and seeing on the news that some people have passed while not knowing how unwell they might actually be.
More than 1,200 people with COVID are now isolating at home, and another 1,600 household contacts are with them. That's nearly 3,000 in total isolating at home. Just 117 people with COVID are in MIQ. An Otago University researcher in the Department of Public Health, Lucy Telfer-Barnard, says it'd be better if more people were in MIQ with health staff on hand than at home.
It's so much better for them if they can be somewhere where there are people checking on them regularly rather than at home where they're kind of reliant on a whole bunch of services being able to coordinate well to make sure that they're well supported.
From this Sunday, returning travellers will have their MIQ stays halved from 14 days to 7. Dr Telfer-Barnard says most of these people are very low risk and are more likely to get COVID in Auckland than bring it back into the country. She says low-risk returnees who are remaining in Auckland should be able to skip MIQ altogether, freeing up beds for those who actually have COVID.
We really need those MIQ beds for the known cases and their close contacts who can't effectively isolate at home.
Health Minister Andrew Little says public health staff were not expecting cases would increase this quickly.
What happened is the rapid escalation in numbers in the last couple of weeks took the system somewhat by surprise, and so that initial stage of contacting people with a positive result meant that some were not contacted in a timely enough fashion.
However, actual case numbers are in line with the government's estimates. In the 7 days ending Sunday, there were 1,037 cases reported. Modelling released last week shows they expected 1,000 cases that week. Either way, Andrew Little says these issues are stumbling blocks that'll be sorted.
COVID will spread throughout the rest of the country. We need to make sure that every other DHB, every other region is prepared and ready, and their systems are ready to go. So everybody is looking at what's happening in Auckland at the moment, because we can't repeat the kind of things that we've seen in Auckland around other parts of the country.
People currently in MIQ who've done more than 7 days by Sunday will be released early.
Sport New Zealand has updated its guidelines after some Auckland cricket clubs told members equipment like bats, pads and even balls could not be shared between players at Level 3, Step 2. Players who say the rules just aren't cricket are delighted by Sport New Zealand's dismissal of the old guidelines. They're now able to train and play properly so long as physical distancing is observed. Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe report on some ropey rules that have been hit for 6.
'Twas the COVID cricket code that had Auckland's weekend warriors stumped.
Cricket is actually something that brings people together, and these were the rules I was able to identify that they're separating us.
Now it'll be more tougher for the new bowlers to learn. They have to bring their own balls and all that stuff.
I thought we won't have any trainings.
But don't panic, the old guidelines have been retired. More on that in the second innings. But first, let's delve into this cricketing controversy that's left some of the city's amateurs in a spin. After 15 years on the sidelines, I'm donning the whites. I'm padded, gloved, boxed and blocked to take you through some equipment sharing rules that had the casual club cricketer scratching their head.
Now, the first rule we're going to cover related to bowling. Got aim! Now, before last night and some last minute changes, it was 1 ball per person. If you were using your club's balls, then 1 ball had to be allocated to each player for the entire training session. Rule number 2 relates to fielding training. You could field like normal, but only using 1 ball for each player. Luckily, this rule has now been bowled over as well. Another rule, no lingering before or after training. Hey bro, nice delivery. Woo!
So much. So before yesterday, the sharing of equipment, including the ball, was not enabled. Therefore, it didn't allow any match activities or any fielding activities. So all you could really do was, in a one-on-one situation, have a live net with a teammate, but you having that ball throughout this training session and no other person touching it.
Meet Dean Bartlett. He's Auckland Cricket's General Manager of Community Cricket. He's top of the order when it comes to the club game here in lockdown Tamaki Makaurau. In a nutshell, Auckland Cricket had been following broad rules put out by Sport NZ. Some Auckland clubs were parked up chatting outside at Grafton United, then sent the rules, including don't share balls, to their players, outlining how cricket could be played at level 3.2.
We weren't too sure how long 3.2 would last, so therefore if we couldn't share the ball effectively, we didn't know when we could start playing even just small-sided games or fielding sessions.
Luckily, the rules have been updated by Sport NZ, while the old ones have been retired.
So we've been, I suppose, lobbying for more clarity around cricket in particular. Up until last night when the sector update got released, cricket had not been mentioned in Sport New Zealand guidelines, which we felt a little bit strange selfishly given we're a summer sport and we're a major summer sport within Aotearoa.
The move delighting Aucklanders hitting the nets.
It was a little bit gut-wrenching, heart-wrenching, but I've heard the news that they are changed now, so I'm really excited about that.
So after a bit of an appeal, the death of some rules that just weren't cricket.
I don't like cricket.
And if you were listening to that piece from our two Nicks on radio, you really do have to go online, if it is only to see Nick get his swagger on in some loner cricket whites. I'm no expert, but I think he's pretty crappy at cricket. E te iwi e haere nei e a checkpoint. Airlines desperate to get Kiwis home by Christmas say time's up on MIQ. A cocaine trafficking ring is dealt a blow of its own. And have you planned your Christmas Day menu yet? Well, you better get your skates on. Apparently so. Homai o whakaaro. We would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. You can text us 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email checkpoints@rnz.co.nz. Time for the headlines now. Ko marama anō tēnei.
Thank you, Lisa. The police have confirmed the person added to the Ministry of Health's COVID-19 death toll today is the same man shot dead in West Auckland last week. Robert James Hart was shot in a Newland driveway and tested positive for the virus after his death. 3 people have been jointly charged with the murder. The Whānau Ora commissioning agency says the gap in the vaccination rates between Māori and non-Māori is increasing because the Ministry of Health is refusing to share vital data. The agency is going back to court to try to get the data from the Health Ministry, which it wants to create a better vaccine rollout for Māori. The Ministry has twice rejected the request for privacy reasons. The agency's chairperson, Merepeka Raukawa-Tate, told Checkpoint she cannot understand the Ministry's rationale given they're all working to get the vaccination rates up. A public health researcher says the government should consider dropping managed isolation for low-risk travellers. Otago University's Lucy Taufa-Barnard says double vaccinated people from low-risk countries pose little danger to spreading the virus in New Zealand. She says it will free up beds for people with COVID-19 and reduce the chances of people isolating at home falling through the cracks. The Southern District Health Board chairman says the resignation of one of its members for protesting against Countdown's proposed vaccine mandate is the right thing to do. Ilka Biguis emailed the supermarket chain saying that as a DHB member she found the proposed mandate immoral, unethical and medically unnecessary. The chair, Pete Hodgson, says it's important DHBs are able to show leadership to protect communities against COVID-19. And the police say more arrests are likely following a joint 10-month investigation into cocaine importation in New Zealand. 9 people were arrested while 50 kilograms of cocaine was seized and more than $300,000 in cash confiscated. Those are the headlines. Our next news and sport update is at 6.
Thanks, Marama. No mai, hoki mai. This is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa e nai. Ko Nona Peltier is here to talk business. Hey, let's start with main freight. So strong demand, rising prices. Hefty profit for them.
Yeah.
What did it make?
Well, an increase of 79%. That's in their first half to September.
to just about $131 million. And revenue was up 41% to more than $2.2 billion. These are really big numbers, and it's not surprising. This was because primarily the price of air and ocean revenue increased across all of its regions. There were increased prices for air and sea, and partly, of course, we know about the demand on shipping, but also with fewer passenger flights, air freight services also had a depleted amount of, capacity to carry all of the goods that people wanted to ship. So that drove up the price there as well. And the interesting thing is that the main freight expects that this imbalance of supply and demand will continue. There's congestion that they see into the future. And so, freight rates are similarly going to remain elevated.
What's happening with food prices, Nona, as well? A little bit of a drop in the last month?
Yeah, well, it was a drop, but not a really big one. And the main reason was fruits and vegetables. So we kind of expect that coming into summer. So there was a drop at about, almost 6% last month. And that was primarily because, for example, people probably have noticed the price of tomatoes is well down, like 26%. Lettuce down 23%, and capsicums 22%, also a drop. And cucumbers down also 25%. Offsetting that are kiwi fruit up 41%, broccoli up 10%, and carrots up also almost 10%. So overall, depends on what your fancy is.
Yeah, what your taste buds prefer.
Absolutely. But look, if you think that the prices are still a bit high, you're not wrong. And that's because grocery food prices were flat. So that's the other items that you pick up in the supermarket. And overall, annual food prices, they rose 3.7% in the year to October. And that's mostly because of restaurant meals and ready-to-eat foods. And, overall, fruits and veggies are still up 9% on the year, and grocery food up 3.1%. So if you think you're spending a lot more, well, you are.
And Nona, what are the market numbers looking like?
Interesting. We saw the inflation fears that were triggered by an extraordinarily high increase in U.S. consumer prices. That they were rising at the fastest pace in 3 decades, and we're talking about a 6.2% surge on an annual basis. That really spooked the market. Those inflation fears have definitely had an impact on our region. But overall, we did pretty well. We rose 4 points to 13,027. And our dollar is pretty strong still at 70.4 US cents, 96.4 Australian, and 52.5 pence.
Thanks, Nona. Ka kite, that's Nona Peltier with our business news. Fears international airlines could give up on New Zealand as a destination if the government doesn't relax MIQ restrictions immediately. The government signalled changes to overseas arrivals from early next year, but airlines and airports say they can move much earlier to get tens of thousands of expats home by Christmas. And the industry says immediate changes make sense as community COVID cases eclipse those in managed isolation. Well, joining me now is Justin Umbers from the Board of Airline Representatives. Justin, what's the problem or harm in waiting a few months to find out what ultimately is going to happen with MIQ?
Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
Look, the challenge we've got is ultimately it can take up to 3 months for airlines to get aircraft pulled back out of storage and crews retrained and back and up and running. So we do have a bit of spare capacity into New Zealand at the moment with the existing flights coming in, because often they've only got about 30 to 60 people on board going into MIQ. But for making sure that we keep airlines hanging on and flying here, we have to give certainty. And we're actually the last country in the world, pretty much, certainly in the developed world, for putting out a plan. Even Western Australia, the famously conservative Western Australia, they've put out their plan to say they'll be letting in vaccinated visitors quarantine-free at the end of January once they hit their 90%. So we just need to get that certainty out there.
So in terms of Christmas then, if there is the demand and tens of thousands of people want to come home, and if they were able to, is it realistic to think that we'd have the air capacity to get everybody home, putting MIQ to one side?
Yeah, sure. I think we're certainly seeing the demand every time there's a lobby release that goes out for MIQ with 30,000 people desperate to get home. I think absolutely there's a lot of spare capacity, and I think airlines would do whatever they can to be able to release some extra flights to get people home. And particularly when you look at Australia, I think there's a lot of aircraft that are ready to be able to start putting in a whole lot of extra capacity in Australia. But to get them home by New Zealand, by Christmas to New Zealand, we really need to be told now.
Is that a safe option? Like if you just increase capacity and you're just putting more people on the same flights and having them closer together, is that safe?
Yeah, look, I think it's fascinating. We've just heard in your news piece earlier before that the Otago study's shown that, Kiwis are in countries with much lower risk of infection than actually is what's going on in Auckland at the moment. And Australia's included in that, United States, Canada, France. There's lots of countries that are actually lower risk than what we're seeing in Canada. So double vaccinated tourists travellers who are already got a clear negative test, they're actually much lower risk than the community they're flying into. So it just makes no sense to be putting them into precious MIQ rooms, which could be used for isolating those that are already sick here in Auckland.
What are airlines saying about New Zealand and how we're operating at the moment?
Look, there's increasing frustration. I'm seeing routes and aircraft already being pulled. And airlines are telling me that's because they can't see a way through when they're going to be able to fill up their aircraft. And what's happening at the moment is airline managers in New Zealand are having to justify route performance and how much they're making on these flights coming in with 60 passengers on board with the rest of the world. So up in Europe, they're filling up aircraft very rapidly because they're open to travel now for vaccinated travellers. So the route performance in New Zealand is looking high risk and high cost. So, yeah.
So, Justin, you were saying at the start of this conversation that you kind of need about 3 months to get your capacity up, get crews available and up to scratch and the planes. I'm just wondering, in terms of making a significant commitment to flying a certain route, so, for example, next year, 2022, when would airlines have decided what routes are their priorities and how many flights to lay on? And does that mean we're cut out of next year already?
Yeah, sure. So they've already decided and set their schedules largely in terms of the actual routes they'll be flying now for all of summer and through until March. Really, we've got until about March to be able to send clear signals for airlines to fly the following summer about what our settings are going to be, and particularly with the pressure on up north. So you've actually got to have 5 to 7 months lead time, the way the seasons work in the northern and southern hemisphere, to signal to airlines and grab that capacity that you're wanting for your country. So that's why it's so important that we move quickly and send that clear signal through. And a great start and an easy signal that we're serious about opening the border would be to say, right, vaccinated New Zealanders come home for Christmas. They don't need to go into MIQ, and that will really improve inbound volumes for the carriers.
If you can just bring it into sort of stark contrast for us for a moment, Justin, how does New Zealand's international travel look right now compared to, say, 2 years ago?
Oh, it's down 98% down, so it's just night and day at the moment, particularly with the Tasman closed. So a typical month we'd have 600,000 people flying into New Zealand. Right now we've got about 12,000 people flying in, so I think we're back to the 1960s in terms of the number of people flying into New Zealand right now.
Really appreciate time, Justin. That's Justin Taiambas, who's from the Board of Airline Representatives there. It is about 12 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. He muriaki ina pita pita kōrero. After the news at 6, government ministers and the Director General of Health are at odds over Maori vaccination data. It's 3 strikes, you're out. The law Labour has long promised to axe is finally set for the scrap heap, this time for real. Opposition parties say the move will put New Zealanders at risk. Here's our Deputy Political Editor, Craig McCulloch.
Daniel Fitzgerald is still getting used to his freedom. Nearly 5 years the man spent locked up under the 3 strikes law. He was released last month after the Supreme Court overturned his 7-year sentence, deeming it excessive.
He rang me yesterday. I don't think it's actually dawned on him, really, that he's effectively a free man again. He's lost a large portion of his life for behaviour which people would not think merited 7 years imprisonment.
Defence lawyer Kevin Preston represents Daniel Fitzgerald. In 2016, his client grabbed a woman on Wellington's Cuba Street and kissed her on the cheek. The man who has schizophrenia was found guilty of indecent assault, and as it was his third strike, he was given the maximum penalty.
If it was New Year's Eve and people were out celebrating, pre-COVID of course, somebody kisses somebody else on the cheek, that's concerning behaviour, but it's not, in the big scheme of things, very, very serious behaviour.
The Supreme Court deemed the sentence a breach of the Bill of Rights. Justice Minister Chris Whānau says the three strikes law is draconian and has failed to reduce serious crime. He says it strips judges of their independence and results in absurd outcomes. Its time, he says, is up.
We are doing it because we made a commitment at the last election to do it.
In fact, it was one of Labour's Let's Do This promises back in 2017, but became Let's Not after New Zealand first refused its support. That obstacle is no longer there.
The promise of this making people safer has not eventuated, and again the disproportionate nature of some of the sentences that have come through have been a concern for the judiciary, a concern for the legal fraternity, and we made a commitment at the last election to deal with it.
The law was introduced in 2010 as part of a deal between National and ACT. To date, 18 people have been sentenced to a third strike. Both the opposition parties have vowed to reinstate the law. They say the government is putting Kiwis at risk.
These are people who are the worst of the worst criminals with an average of 74 convictions.
It will make New Zealanders less safe. It will put public safety at more risk, and it will result in more victimisation and victims.
Cabinet has decided the law change won't be retrospective, meaning sentences handed out under the old regime will stand. Kevin Preston says that's not good enough. If the law is unfit, so too are the sentences.
I'm not saying all these people should be released. What I'm saying is these cases should be looked at again.
Cabinet thoroughly went through a whole lot of issues. We decided the victims need to be protected from going through another process of resentencing.
The legislation is set down for debate in Parliament next week and will then go through a full select committee process. But this time it's certain. 3 strikes is done for.
An organised crime group alleged to be one of the most significant suppliers of cocaine in Aotearoa has been dealt a massive blow. A 10-month joint operation by law enforcement in New Zealand, Colombia and the United States has resulted in the seizure of 50 kilograms of cocaine, $300,000 cash and 9 arrests so far. Police and Customs spoke to media in Christchurch today, including reporter Neva Chittick.
The message today is don't bother coming.
That warning from the organised crime group director Greg Williams, who revealed police had closed down one of the biggest importers of cocaine into this country.
We'll identify your people, we'll identify and break and disrupt your networks. We will go after your assets, whether here or offshore, and where necessary, we're quite prepared to extradite people back here who are involved in this offending, and we will work with international partners to also hold people accountable back in other countries who are involved in this process.
The cocaine is said to have come from Colombia, with 6 Colombian nationals and 1 Argentine among the current arrests. It's resulted in a response from agencies around the world, including Colombian police, the US Drug Enforcement Administration and New Zealand police.
These people are setting up the importation mechanisms, the supply lines into local gangs and organised crime, and then wanting to push the cash out of New Zealand as quickly as can. And we've identified this typology as transnational organised crime cells. So this is Operation Mist, is a TNOC cell inserted into New Zealand for this purpose.
It was revealed today places like New Zealand are being targeted by transnational crime groups because of the high prices paid here for cocaine. A kilo costs $2,500 to make, but could fetch $170,000 on the streets here, a markup of 6,700%. Here's the head of intelligence for Customs, Bruce Berry.
In the year of 2020, our partners in Customs stopped around 1.5 tonnes of illicit drugs arriving and causing harm in our communities. This year, we're closer to 1.8. This problem is not going away.
Customs describes drug smuggling on an industrial scale. Bruce Berry says those involved concealed the cocaine coming in and the money earned from the drugs going out inside all manner of things, including machinery inside shipping containers.
If you can imagine it, we've seen it as a concealment. It's as simple as that. And the quantums that we deal with range from a few grams through to multi-hundred kilos.
Superintendent Greg Williams expects there to be more arrests, both in New Zealand and Colombia.
Christmas is still more than a month away, but food's flying off shelves as kitchen whizzes prepare early for the holiday season. Not me. Shipping delays that have been around since the start of COVID-19 pandemic are lingering, meaning some products might be a rare find. While people are being told not to be a Grinch and panic buy, the advice from grocers is to get in quick. Our reporter Jake McKee has the story.
Now bring us a figgy pudding, now bring us a figgy pudding, now bring us a figgy pudding.
Figgy pudding, turkey, tofurkey or fish. Whatever's going in your belly this Christmas, grocers around the country have been working harder than usual to ensure there'll be kai on the table. Auckland grocery chain Whānau Fresh has had all of its imported goods arrive already. But does Chief Executive Bryce Howard think that stock will be enough?
I think the answer to that is no. We're seeing a very early Christmas rush. Our Christmas stock, and it's been selling for about 3 weeks now.
Bryce Howard says early Christmas sales are up about 300% on last year, which itself broke record trade numbers. Beyond those specialty imported products, he also thinks people could struggle to serve home-baked sweet treats if they leave things too late.
There's still a real hangover from the baking craze, which has come from COVID, and that's put a huge dent in the supply chain of a lot of baking products, cooking products. You put on top of that the recent product recall that Chelsea's had on all their brown sugar and all the products that brown sugar goes into has wiped a lot of products off the shelves.
In Wellington, holiday season preparations began in January for more Wilson's 3 fresh market stores around the region. General Manager Amanda Thompson says they're trying to cater for everyone.
Definitely an increase in the vegan and plant-based foods, so making sure we've got plenty of options for those.
She says shipping's been difficult, which makes it hard to plan for what people might want to eat.
Some people, I think, are fed up with planning things and having them cancelled, so they're likely to leave it till the last minute and have a casual, beautiful barbecue with some salads and whatever's around at the time.
Bryce Howard is seeing a similar trend, with Aucklanders still unsure exactly what their Christmas will look like. It looks like people are planning for just a few seats around the table.
What we decided to do was to develop a small Christmas food kit, which feeds 4 to 6, as well as a large Christmas food kit. And so far with orders, we have seen a large swing towards the smaller food kits.
However, at supermarket giant Countdown, Kitty Hannafin says they're confident they have enough of everything, planning having started before last Christmas. She does say French champagne supply could run dry, but the same happened last year, and she thinks people should pick up a local bottle of bubbles. Kitty Hannafin says if you need something special, maybe get it early, and perhaps for feline friends too.
We're not expecting New Zealanders to go overboard by buying their cats heaps of food for Christmas, but that's the one product that we've had a bit of a consistent issue with. So if you want to treat your cats, perhaps put an extra tin in each week up into Christmas.
The key takeaway, if it's special, get in quick, but try to shop local instead of expecting something fancy from overseas.
Like, seriously, who among us is overachieving and baking already for Christmas? Out yourself now. Text us on 2101. Prince Harry claims he warned Twitter boss Jack Dorsey of the Capitol riot in January before it happened. The royal has declared himself a misinformation warrior and calls the issue a global humanitarian crisis, the BBC's Mark Lobel reports.
In his latest salvo against hate on social media, the former army captain, now misinformation warrior, joined a 33-minute live session for Wired's Rewired tech conference entitled The Internet Lie Machine, where it emerged referring to these angry riots at the US Capitol on January 6th. He's also, it seems, somewhat of a soothsayer.
Have you ever had a chance to present your case to the leaders of these companies, Mark Zuckerberg, Jack Dorsey?
No, not directly, not personally. Jack and I were emailing each other prior to January the 6th, where I warned him that his platform was allowing a coup to be staged. That email was sent the day before, and then it happened, and I haven't heard from him since.
In March, Twitter's chief executive, Jack Dorsey, conceded during congressional testimony that yes, his platform had played a role in the storming of the US Capitol, but added it's not just about the technological systems that we use. Prince Harry warned a small group of accounts is causing a large amount of chaos online, sullying the internet for future generations by filling it with hate, division and lies.
Misinformation is a global humanitarian crisis. As you quite rightly pointed out, I felt it personally over the years, and I'm now watching it happen globally, affecting everyone, not just America, literally everyone around the world. And I guess the scariest part about it is you don't need to be online to be affected by this.
Leading to this personal swipe on somewhat well-trodden ground for Harry at sections of the UK press.
They've successfully turned fact-based news into opinion-based gossip with devastating consequences for the country.
Asked for his solution to the problem, he's not recommending everyone takes leave from social media, as he and Meghan have done, conceding it's far too addictive for that. But instead, he says, it's for big companies and advertisers to kick out the troublesome few, whose hate and lies are then spread far and wide.
A lot of feedback on the battle over Māori vaccination data between the Director General of Health and Whānau Ora. Overwhelmingly in support of Whānau Ora, I would have to say. But this person, on the other hand, says, I am one of those Māori who don't want my personal details handed over to Whānau Ora or Merepeka Raukawa Tate. Who speaks up for my rights, this person says. Others, though, say releasing, if it's not about being vaccinated, it's about the rights of individuals when it comes to sharing their personal information. We'll have more on this story after 6. I'm about to lower the tone, so turn away if you're easily offended. On the cricket story from Nick Trubridge, sharing boxes regularly results in the spreading of pubic lice, even in school cricket. Apparently so.
Thanks, Lisa. RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipore. A man shot dead in West Auckland tested positive for COVID-19 after his death last week. 3 people have been jointly charged with the murder of Robert James Hart in a Newland driveway. Jean Bell reports.
The police have confirmed Robert Hart is the same person added to the Ministry of Health's COVID-19 death total today. Stuff is reporting the accused trio are in self-isolation. The police are seeking a 4th man, Dylan James Mitchell Harris, in relation to Mr Hart's death. The 35-year-old, who has gang connections across the North Island, has a warrant for arrest for murder. He's about 182 centimetres tall, of medium build, and has a full sleeve tattoo on his left arm. He is considered dangerous and should not be approached.
The Health Minister says the recent jump in COVID cases was unexpected, even though the numbers are in line with their own modelling. Some COVID-positive patients isolating at home have waited up to 3 days to hear from public health staff, let alone have a health check. Andrew Little admits some people isolating at home haven't been called quickly enough.
What happened is the rapid escalation in numbers in the last couple of weeks took the system somewhat by surprise, and so that initial stage of contacting people with a positive result meant that some were not contacted in a timely enough fashion.
However, government modelling expected 1,000 cases last week when there were 1,037 in reality. Today's tally is 185, with 8 in Northland, 25 in Waikato and the rest in Auckland. The Whānau Ora Commissioning Agency says the gap in the vaccination rates between Maori and non-Maori is increasing because the Ministry of Health is refusing to share vital data. The agency is going back to court to try to get the data which it wants to create a better vaccine rollout for Maori. The ministry has twice rejected the request for privacy reasons. The agency's chairperson, Merepeka Raukawa Tate told Checkpoint it has been surprising to see the ministry's attitude to releasing the data. She says all the agency is trying to do is help drive up vaccination rates, and she's disappointed with the refusal. 2 pedestrians have been killed by a vehicle in Taupō this afternoon. The police say they were hit by a single vehicle about 1:40 on Lake Terrace. Police are continuing to ask motorists to avoid the area. The Auditor-General has criticised the Health Ministry for failing to deal with potential conflicts of interest in its handling of the $50 million COVID-19 saliva testing contract. John Ryan says inquiries by his office have revealed there was no procurement plan or independent audit before the contract was awarded to the Asia Pacific Healthcare Group in May. 4 of the 5 panel members had indicated potential conflicts of interest, including past and current employment relationships with organisations tendering for the contract. In a letter to the ministry, Mr Ryan says the ministry left itself open to a perception of bias. However, he says he does not consider further inquiry is warranted at this time. A US teenager accused of shooting 3 people during Black Lives Matter protests in Wisconsin last year has taken the stand in his own defence. Kyle Rittenhouse broke down in tears during his testimony. Under questioning by the prosecutor, he says he was cornered by several men and acted in self-defence.
Everybody that you shot at that night you intended to kill, correct?
I didn't intend to kill them. I intended to stop the people who were attacking me.
By killing them?
I did what I had to do to stop the person who was attacking me.
By killing them?
2 of them passed away, but I stopped the threat from attacking me.
Kyle Rittenhouse is alleged to have travelled across state lines with an illegal semi-automatic rifle. He's charged with shooting 2 men dead and wounding another. He's pleaded not guilty to all charges. The Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment wants coordinated action against weeds posing a threat to native ecosystems. Simon Upton says weeds are smothering native plants and destroying the habitats of native fauna. He recommends developing a publicly accessible exotic plants database and an emerging risks team to scan for potentially harmful new varieties. However, Mr Upton says this will not be achieved by government policies alone, as community groups, iwi, hapu and landowners are already working to control weeds.
Let's get some nationwide monitoring and surveillance to stand behind and help the community groups and the regional councils who are trying to do something about it.
More than 1,800 exotic plants now survive in the wild in New Zealand, joined by about 20 new ones each year. It's coming up to 6 minutes past 6. Daryl Mitchell may have been the player of the match, but England captain Owen Morgan has lauded the batting of Jimmy Neesham as the Black Caps advanced to the final of cricket's T20 World Cup in the UAE. Mitchell blasted an unbeaten 72 from 47 deliveries as New Zealand chased down their target of 167 with an over to spare. The Black Caps were struggling at the midpoint of their innings and needed more than 10 runs and over before Neesham came in and clubbed 27 off just 11 balls.
Everything worked right up until the point that Neesham came in. It's a fantastic cameo in I suppose, high-pressure circumstances when his team needed. We've played against Jimmy a lot. He's not struck the ball like that against us ever, so it's really good batting.
New Zealand will now play the winner of tonight's second semi-final between Pakistan and Australia in the final on Monday morning. Tom Saunders' gamble to give up a managed isolation spot has paid off, with the New Zealand sailor winning the Laser Class World Championships in Barcelona. Saunders had a voucher to return home in October, but decided to stay in Europe, not wanting to give up on a crack at a world title.
Yeah, risking MIQ to do it, which was quite a big call because I didn't really know if I was going to get home before Christmas the way things were heading. But yeah, obviously really happy that I made that decision and it's all worked out pretty well.
He's now secured an MIQ spot to return home in December. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Mila Edmondson from Auckland Library is on running them during a lockdown, which includes things like e-collections as well as click and collecting. Andrew Arris, football lover and activist. Once he took a ball from London to Brazil to share the love, now he's taking one to Glasgow to help save our place on the planet. And in our changing world, Claire Kincannon meets the dog's been trained to spot cancer in humans on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Friday. Now, a front moves over the South Island tomorrow, bringing a period of heavy rain and strong northwesterly winds to parts of southern and central New Zealand. A big reminder to please keep up to date with severe weather warning and watches. Northland to Wellington, including Coromandel Peninsula, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Fine spells and isolated showers, rain developing tomorrow afternoon. For Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine spells, isolated showers inland this evening with thunderstorms possible. For Nelson, Bulla and Westland, rain becoming persistent and heavy tomorrow morning before easing from the afternoon. Marlborough and Canterbury, fine spells developing and isolated showers inland. Patchy rain developing tomorrow afternoon and evening. For Fiordland, Southland and Otago, showers, but a period of rain around midday tomorrow. Some showers will be heavy tomorrow afternoon. For the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods on the way and a few showers for tomorrow. It's coming up to 6:09.
Kia ora, e hono mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The National Party wants the Health Minister to intervene to allow the Whānau Ora Commissioning Agency access to information about unvaccinated Māori. The agency is going back to court to get data from the Health Ministry, which it wants to urgently boost Māori vaccination rates. Andrew Little says while he expects the information is shared with Whānau Ora, he can't force that to happen. Here's our political reporter, Katie Scotcher.
New Zealand has today hit a significant vaccine milestone. 90% of the eligible population has had one dose. But for Maori, rates are lower. Just 75% are partially vaccinated. Those rates are worrying the Whānau Ora Commissioning Agency Chair, Meripiko Tate.
We're getting more and more nervous as every day goes by. Our providers are as well, and we must get to those who are hesitant, who might need more information. We've got to get to them, and as soon as possible.
The agency wants access to information about unvaccinated Maori to create a tailored rollout. It's twice had its request rejected by the Health Ministry for privacy reasons. The latest rejection followed a High Court ruling that the ministry must reconsider its refusal to release the data. Meripiko Tate says they have iwi-wide support to get the data and will be taking further legal action.
With Auckland potentially being opened up within the next couple of weeks, travelling everywhere, then we are so very worried right now. So we have to do something. There is no alternative for us. We must go back to court.
The Māori Development Minister, Willie Jackson, wants the data handed over to Whānau Ora.
I couldn't be more disappointed that they're having to go back to court, given he's got the majority, maybe 90-95% of Māori supporting him. I believe he's got Ngāi Tahu who are against it, and one or two others. But, we're in an emergency situation and Whānau Ora should be given that information.
And he's raised this with the Director-General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield.
I've given him my view and I've been very clear about my view, but Dr Bloomfield does what Dr Bloomfield does, I suppose.
National's Chris Bishop says the Health Minister, Andrew Little, needs to intervene.
Andrew Little needs to make it very clear to Dr Bloomfield what he should do with that data. If the government wants the Whānau Ora Commissioning Agency to have access to the data, they can do that. They are the government. He is in charge of the Health Ministry. He can make that happen.
Andrew Little says he's spoken to Dr Bloomfield multiple times as recently as yesterday and asked that the situation is resolved as soon as possible. But he says that's as far as he'll go.
As Minister, I don't get to instruct the Director-General on how he should fulfil his obligations under the Privacy Act or any other piece of legislation under which he has statutory duties. I've made it pretty clear my view that we need to be doing everything we can to support organisations like the Whānau Ora Commissioning Agency and iwi health providers to get the information that means they can do the job that we all need, which is to increase those vaccination rates for Māori.
Andrew Little says he expects data that has not yet been shared with Whānau Ora will be, but adds he can't force that to happen.
And we approached the Ministry of Health on this story but have yet to receive a response. A lot of you, though, are getting in touch to express your views. So far, really pretty much in favour of Whānau Ora getting the data. Rosemary from Katikati says a one-on-one conversation with a trusted professional is just what many need. The worst someone can say is no thanks. This is a life and death situation and we need to make exceptions to the rules. We're lucky to have John Tamahere and Meripiko Tate advocating for Māori. Sarah says, I think the High Court should ask MOH for evidence of the concerns they've received so that those can be independently verified and assessed. MOH can't be allowed simply to rebuff a High Court ruling without proving why. Not impressed by this arrogance from a government department. Another person says, absolutely the data should be released for the Māori and corporations to act for their people. As Meripeka said, into the gap has come social media misinformation, superstition and ignorance. The obsession with privacy is beyond reason and just an excuse for power and control. On the other hand, though, one listener says, releasing that information to Whānau Ora is a total breach of privacy. And if they release my information to them, I'll take it to the Privacy Commission and the court for breach of privacy. And another person says, there may be a broader privacy issue if the Ministry of Health had decided to release details of all unvaccinated people to community providers, not just Māori. The discussion on RNZ would have inevitably featured objections to the invasion of privacy. It's really interesting. If you've got time, the High Court decision is online, about 35 pages. It goes into great depth about privacy and actually the consultation with the Privacy Commissioner and that officer's views on the exceptions to the privacy rule. We should also say we approached the Director General of Health, Dr. Ashley Broomfield, for an interview, but he declined. Large surveillance domes in the Waihopai Valley are being removed after more than 30 years of service. The Government Communications Security Bureau says the technology at the station near Blenheim is now virtually obsolete. Samantha G has more.
It's a spy base that has not so much been operating in the shadows, rather than dominating the landscape. 20 minutes from Blenheim in the Waihopai Valley, the two white domes feature among row after row of vines, like large golf balls. For the last 30 years, the radomes have been used to intercept satellite communications, but the minister responsible for the security agency GCSB, Andrew Little, says the nature of telecommunications has changed. He says they no longer need the radomes, as they gathered less and less intelligence.
The amount of intelligence, usable intelligence that is being gathered from them is pretty minimal now. It's less than 1% of the intelligence that the GCSB collects. So, and there's other ways of collecting the intelligence that they're looking for, and that's what we'll concentrate on.
Just 0.5% of intelligence reports by the GCSB have been produced using the spy base in recent years. Andrew Little says he was briefed on the domes coming down earlier this year. He says while the domes will go, the base will remain.
Part of the approach was to obviously keep our Five Eyes partners informed about what we're proposing to do, and then to work up the plan to remove the domes and then make it public at an appropriate time, which is now.
Anti-bases campaign organiser Murray Horton, who has called for Waihopai's closure for the last 30 years, says he's not surprised the domes are being dismantled.
They date back to the 1980s. They sort of date back to an era of landlines and fax machines and, VCRs, video cassette recorders. So, yes, they're 1980s technology.
He says the base would simply use different methods to spy on civilian communications. Murray Horton and others are planning to return to Waihopai in January for their annual protest, calling for the base to be closed. Waihopai has been no stranger to protest action over the decades, among those against New Zealand's participation in United States-led conflicts and the Five Eyes intelligence sharing arrangement.
3 men involved in the attack on the Waihopai satellite base this morning have been remanded in custody after a judge said he could not rule out other attacks on military installations. A group calling itself Ploughshares has admitted cutting through 3 security fences before deflating the cover on one of the giant domes at the base near Blenheim at about 6 o'clock this morning.
Green Party security and intelligence spokesman Tiano Tuiono says he's happy the blight on the landscape is being removed, but he also wants to see the entire base shut down.
What is the value of that spy base? We know that they certainly did not pick up the biggest terrorist attack on New Zealand soil because they were too busy following what the Five Eyes was telling them to do. We had the biggest terrorist attack in Christchurch against our Muslim whānau, and the GCSB were missing in action.
Marlborough Mayor John Leggett says the radomes are a rich part of the valley's history.
It's caused a little bit of political unrest over the years. There's been protests there that we've all been aware of, and the domes housing those satellites have become part of the landscape, and I think in many ways we've accepted it as part of the landscape. We've got Spy Valley wines up there.
Mayor Leggett says it was like cutting out a large tree from the corner of your section, something you did for the right reasons, but it could take a while to adjust to the view.
It is 18 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. New Zealand's unemployment rate may have dropped to a record low, but Australia's is rising. So much so that those without jobs in Australia are now double what it was after the 1991 recession. Australians who lost work during the pandemic risk becoming long-term unemployed, a situation that is hard to escape from. Here's the ABC's Carly Williams.
Ashley Stevenson is a qualified horticulturist. She's passionate about working, but things have been tough for a long time now.
I'm 65 years old now and haven't had a full-time paying job for 8 years, and I'm now homeless.
As a job seeker, Miss Stevenson applies for 20 jobs a month. She also has 15 years' experience as a pathology collector, but the longer she is out of work, the harder it gets to lock down a job.
It's upsetting that no one will speak to me and see that even though I'm 65, I am very able. In order to do a tertiary diploma course and pass with some distinction, they just look at my birthday and go, no.
Ashley Stevenson is one of 826,000 people who have been on income support for more than a year, which is considered long-term unemployment. The fresh data from the Australian Council of Social Services, or ACOS, shows 80% of unemployed people are now long-term unemployed. Cassandra Goldie from ACOS reckons this is the worst we've seen it.
The last time we had this kind of peak in long-term unemployment was after the 1991 recession.
And Australians who lost work during the pandemic are now also at risk of sliding into the category of long-term unemployed. It's a situation which is hard to escape.
We know right now we've got just one job available for every 6 people who are either looking for a job or certainly looking for more paid work.
Not only are the more than 800,000 people unemployed long-term stuck at the back of the jobs queue, they're living off just $47 a day. Economist Sewell Eslake says the pain is being felt by them and the wider economy.
There's a significant amount of income that isn't being generated within the community because a large number of people who like to work for one reason or another aren't able to. And if they are able to find work, the lower the income they're likely to earn whilst they remain in employment.
So how can we prevent prolonged unemployment? Cass Goldie from ACOS wants to see an individual approach and a chance for people to upskill.
So instead of punitive notions like work for the dole, we need to invest in employment services to help to support people to retrain so that they can have a real chance of getting to the head of that queue.
Poland has accused Belarus of committing terrorism over its role in an escalating row between the two countries. Thousands of migrants are stuck at the border in freezing weather attempting to enter Poland. They fear they're days away from dying en masse. Belarus is accused of sending people to the border in revenge for EU sanctions. And the BBC's Nick Beak has this report.
For those who'd hoped to find a new life, safe in the European Union, there's a grim realisation this could now be home. Trapped between Belarus and Poland, journalists and crucially aid agencies are being kept away.
It's very, very bad.
We managed to contact Ilyas, who was a scientist in Iraq. He wants EU member Poland to let them through.
My message is I want to open the border European Poland.
Why should Poland open the border to you?
1 day, 2 days, 3 days. After I died.
You fear that people will die?
Yes.
Poland has been accused of pushing back migrants illegally. But it wants to highlight this: Belarusian troops appearing to force migrants along the border. The Polish accusing Belarus of terrorism, masterminded by Russia. And tonight, Angela Merkel appealed directly to Moscow.
You are all following these disturbing images. I had Russian President Vladimir Putin on the phone today and I asked him to take action with President Lukashenko because people are being used here.
But Russia has hit back, claiming the EU is provoking Belarus. Moscow released footage, which it said showed 2 bombers being sent to patrol its allies' airspace in a show of solidarity and strength. as international tensions rise from this border chaos. This huge forest, called Białowieża, is one of Europe's oldest woodlands, but it's now the epicenter of the continent's newest migrant crisis. Thousands have been trying to make their way from Belarus through these trees to here in Poland, and many more are set to follow, determined to take their chances in this wilderness if it means reaching EU soil. Because in Belarus's capital, Minsk, more families are preparing to head to the border after being welcomed by President Lukashenko's regime, undeterred by the spiralling misery tonight in the makeshift camps that soon awaits them.
There have been tense exchanges and tears in the trial of teenager Kyle Rittenhouse in the US, who's accused of murdering 2 people and wounding another during the racial unrest in Wisconsin last year. It's a case that will test the distinction between self-defence and vigilante behaviour. CNN's Sarah Sidner has more.
Is your mind clear today?
Yes, Your Honor.
Kyle Rittenhouse took the stand in his own defense for the killing of 2 men and wounding of another last summer during the unrest that exploded in Kenosha, Wisconsin.
I knew there was protests, demonstrations, and riots going on in the later evening.
The next day, his friend suggested they go to help protect businesses, and they did. That led to his first deadly shooting.
I hear somebody scream, "Burn in hell." And I replied with friendly, friendly, friendly to let them know, hey, I'm just here to help.
He said he noticed a dumpster fire, went towards it, and was approached by 2 men.
I look over my shoulder and Mr. Rosenbaum was now running from my right side. I was cornered from in front of me with Mr. Zeminski. And there were people right there.
His sobbing prompted the judge to call for a break. Rittenhouse returned completely composed.
And Mr. Rosenbaum was right there at the corner of the Duramax, starting to chase me. A gunshot is fired from behind me, and I take a few steps, and that's when I turn around. And as I'm turning around, Mr. Rosenbaum is coming at me with his arms out in front of him. I remember his hand on the barrel of my gun.
As you see him lunging at you, what do you do?
I shoot him.
And how many times did you shoot?
I believe 4.
Rittenhouse says he began to run.
People were screaming, "Get his ass, get his ass, get him, get him, get him."
Rittenhouse then describes how and why he shot the other 2 men, saying he was defending his own life.
Mr. Huber, he's holding a skateboard like a baseball bat, and he swings it down, and I block it with my arm, trying to prevent it from hitting me, but it still hits me in the neck. And as I block it, it goes flying somewhere off in the distance.
And did you stop then?
No. I get lightheaded, I almost pass out, and I stumble and hit the ground.
Okay.
I'm on my back, and Mr. Huber runs up. As I'm getting up, he strikes me in the neck with his skateboard a second time.
Then what happened?
He grabs my gun, and I can feel it pulling away from me, and I can feel the strap starting to come off my body.
Many of us will have done it, book a table at a cafe or restaurant, then cancel or even do a no-show. But the problem seems to have gotten worse since restaurants reopened after lockdowns. Some owners think it may be to do with the ease of booking tables online and a growing sense that people can do whatever they want without consequences. The BBC's Russell Padmore examines the issue and how hospitality businesses are at risk of going bust.
The next time you're eating at a restaurant during a busy evening, take a look around. It's likely some tables will be empty, as diners who made a booking haven't shown up. According to research by the hospitality service group Zonal and CGA, 1 in 7 customers simply don't turn up, and among younger age groups it's 1 in 3. For many owners, the most unreliable customers are making a reservation online.
I'm Sarah Pathanoglu and I own Alexandra's Greek restaurant and deli in Carlisle. Recently, we have had more people using platforms like Facebook, WhatsApp. These are the kind of people that we find don't turn up.
How much has this digital world in which we live contributed to the problem?
People who book online, they haven't talked to you, they haven't had that personal interaction, and then they don't go back and give me a message. But it's not only that. If they're having to type a message and send it to me, they might do that 20 minutes before they were due to arrive at 7:30. But at 7:10, we're busy serving our customers and we're not looking on social media. So the old-fashioned telephone is really the only way people should be cancelling their bookings and not thinking that we are all on our phones.
One person who says he has a solution is Zaido Musa, the chief executive of Superb, an online platform based in Copenhagen, providing a service to restaurants in more than 100 cities in 20 countries.
It is definitely a global problem. No-shows have become the restaurant's worst enemy. What we're trying to tell restaurants is there's no way you can be online.
A lot of customers going to restaurants maybe simply prefer making a telephone call to get the booking.
That's actually one of the ways we see that guests are actually trying to avoid the paywall when you're making a reservation, right? The no-show application for the restaurant's perspective can mean life or death for them, right? And for their business. When we started, we saw that the no-show rate was at around 20% of the restaurant's total revenue, right? And that's a lot of money. The tendency is they book at multiple restaurants on the same time, on the same evening, to make sure they get a table somewhere.
Ko te kaupapa tuatahi o Pōpō tomorrow from 5 a.m. on First Up. They're going to speak to a Northland GP who's fed up with people wanting exemptions and off-licence medications instead of the COVID vaccine. So that's one to tune in for. On your feedback about getting ready for Christmas, whoa, you guys are organised. Vivian's done everything, made 2 cakes, 1 non-alcoholic. She's getting her outfits planned with the dog, coordinating with her wardrobe. I want a picture, Vivian. And this person says they made their cake last week and it's beautiful. Chris and Whangaparoa's doing well as well. Wow, we're underachieving here at Checkpoint. Speaking of underachieving, this commentary on Nick Trewbridge's cricket capabilities. That's not bowling, that's throwing, says Alec.
RNZ News headlines. I'm Catriona McLeod. The Whānau Ora commissioning agency's Merepeka Raukawa Tate has told Checkpoint she's disappointed it's having to go back